you. Sorry it's taken so long.
I know, no, it's all good. I'm just super stoked to finally get you on because I feel like you were honestly like the OG indie basketball. At least someone that I recognize from being in a band was following me, which is pretty awesome.
Hey, that's
So you've been here since the beginning.
that's right. That's right.
um, but yeah, it's so great to finally have you on, and it's a good time too because Pups has some new music coming out, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah, yeah, we do. It's exciting, you know. I Some days it feels like we just put out another record, like we just
Right.
put out the last record. I know that that's not the case. Like it has been um I think by the time the record comes out it'll have been almost 3 years.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's just one of those things I think uh I don't know if time doesn't like in a lot of ways it feels like it goes really quickly and then in other ways it feels like, um not a lot of time has passed at all. So, but yeah, I'm excited. Working with John Congleton was awesome. Um and people seem to be digging the new singles. So that's all you can really hope for, I think, at this point.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'm sure part of that gap is like, you record an album, tour an album, and it's like as soon as that's over, you're getting right back into the next thing. Was there any sort of gap in between like, you guys touring and then like taking a break?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I don't know that it ever is enough, and I'm not
Yeah.
sure that it ever can be enough. Uh, I think that's just sort of the world as it is. You have like I was just thinking about this because I read the Liz Pelly book about Spotify, but just like Daniel Ek saying people just need to like create like more and create faster. It's like cool, thanks, man. And unfortunately it does in a lot. I think at my most cynical like that though I definitely have those feelings.
Yeah.
But I think the kind of flip side of that, not to kind of discredit that level of thinking because I do think rest and recovery, even in stuff like touring, is really important. But you know, we do have a pretty cool uh just job. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't know.
yeah.
There's no other way to kind of to speak about it, but yeah. So I try and keep in perspective that some days I get to lay on my couch and like read a book all day. If I or if I want to just play the guitar and not really worry about anything, I get to do that too. So there are definitely some pretty cool upsides.
Yeah, definitely. There's two sides to everything, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, well, cool. So like, since the last album you guys put out, which was in 2022, I mean, 3 years is kind of does feel like kind of a long time, but like you said, also not a lot. Do you feel like the new music you have on this new record like has a little bit of a different sound from where you were?
I think so. I think one of the things that I think we recognized with the last record. I don't know if it was like a little bit like pandemic kind of just cabin fever or whatever, but like we definitely just went to like whatever kind of harebrained extreme in terms of like, all right, let's put a saxophone there. Like, let's do some sort of like extended, like weird synthier, almost like kind of, I think of a thing like a song like Habits on the last record that has almost like a, like trap drums and stuff, which
Yeah, yeah.
like, and, I think there is a part of us that always benefits from trying to be a little bit more experimental, a little more precious. Not that I think we're like particularly experimental,
Sure.
but yeah, I think we have a definite ability to overthink, and so anything we can do to try and break those cycles is a good one.
Mhm.
So I think on this record, for myself, certainly, uh, one thing I tried to do was not um overreact is not the right word, but like overthink and really try and force kind of anything. So
Okay.
the way that ended up kind of looking in like a day to day context was sort of like, well, I would try broadly to get a sense of what was going on in the song by kind of listening and playing along, and either learning the chords from, like, if Stefan had written something, learning the chords from Stefan, or if it was a
Yeah.
riff, because we all kind of throw stuff at each other, but obviously because Stefan writes a lot the vocal melodies, a lot of the that stuff kind of um is stuff that he's sort of massaging on a
Hmm.
more regular basis, to kind of put it in a gross way. But like, so, I would, once I'd kind of got an idea of how the demo was working, I would try and kind of write out a chart, like a pretty rough chart, just to sort of um not fall into any habits one way or another. I would
Yeah.
just sort of like write it out, try playing around with it. Maybe, if something got sent to me and we wanted to work on it, if I got it on a Monday and we wanted to work on it on a Thursday, I would spend like Tuesday and Wednesday just sort of, I'd wake up and like have a coffee and try and play along and
Yeah.
see if anything, just like kind of let, almost like it was almost like finger painting, like honestly,
Right,
like
right.
just trying to let myself kind of do whatever.
It's like true creative process.
Yeah, 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 just like fully like wide open, like try not to have any bias, because I think in the past I've been like, you know uh if it didn't feel like I was doing something like super complex,
Hmm.
or like something flashy, or something, just like that felt like I was really making my presence felt, because whatever part of my ego that needed that just like demanded it.
Yeah.
um I think just trying to kind of go with whatever first idea just like elicited a response in me while I was playing. um and so like there are parts on the record, like, there's the way I play Paranoid, just like sort of one chord that's kind of drony, it's a little
Uh-huh.
bit almost like shoegazy.
Yeah.
um was basically like the first idea that I had for the song, and it just kind of worked and everyone seemed into it.
Hmm.
And I think, where in the past, like, I might have gone on like a long walk and tried a bunch of
Yep.
different things, I was like, no, like, I trust my bandmates, if either way, right? Like, they will either tell me something I'm doing doesn't make any sense, or like
Yeah, yeah.
clashes with something, and then also will be like, no, that's cool, like you should keep doing it.
Sure.
um and so I just tried to like embrace that as much as possible. Obviously, it works to varying degrees, and
Of course. Yeah, yeah.
um it's something that wasn't necessarily like a catch-all solution, but I think having that as my mindset allowed me to sort of not think too much about what I had done like on the last song we
Mhm.
worked on, so that this new song I just had to kind of confront it like a new puzzle.
Yeah.
um so I hope that if nothing else feels a little more, there's a little more intention, and I think
Hmm.
it kind of allowed for me to, like, when we were in the studio, um just tell John Congleton basically to like try and push everything over the edge a little bit in terms of
Sure.
like tones, or just like making kind of last second changes that you couldn't fully comfortably like deal with,
Right.
because you just had to go in and record it as soon as he kind of suggested a change, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, so it was just trying to have like that sort of mindset, and
That's
I think the music feels a little more dangerous, a little more warty. Like, I don't think it's like a perfect sounding record. I think we've given up trying to do that. I think we just need to
yeah.
make the records, this is a long kind of
Yeah.
explanation of it, but yeah.
That's that's really interesting because like so I work in like in the creative field. I work in advertising, and it's like this it's really interesting to see that the same sort of process that I go through in like even in like a corporate world, but like the creative process is universal between music or design or film, whatever it is, because it's like sometimes I will have uh I'll go with the first idea because honestly, maybe it's the best, but sometimes I have to like really work around it and like marinate, and sometimes it takes time, but it's really cool to hear that it's the same kind of process.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about it too, like, I don't know how collaborative a lot of the stuff you do is,
Hmm.
but like that kind of throws its own wrench into things when
Definitely.
you're like literally only 25, like in the case of PUP, like 25% of the project, right? Like,
Yep.
um and I think something that we've learned too is like, even if you say are going with your first idea, that might not be the thing that works for someone else. Like that um mindset is not one that was like uniformly shared between the four of us, which I think there can be tension in that. There can be creative sparks. There can also be like, it's like, putting on your like parking brake, like while you're driving full speed. Like there is like a bit of whiplash
Sure.
there sometimes too. Like, um, so one thing that we got like pretty good at was, all right, like if it felt like we got to a point where people were starting to like feel the creep of negativity, um we would try our best to like put something down, like
Mhm.
just make a demo at exactly whatever point. And we have all these demos, we may release them at some point, but like um try and make a demo at exactly where we had found that roadblock, like whatever the most complete version of it was, and then put it down for like 2 weeks
Yeah,
and just try and work on something else, or take 3 days off, like
definitely.
sometimes you have to kind of let that, like you say about marinating, like you kind of have to let the subconscious do the work. You can't, like, if you're actively, my wife and I talk about this a lot, the idea of like doing negative work on something.
Okay.
um like I'm a big believer in that. Like I think you can, like, it's a lot easier um to just try and be consistent, even if sometimes that means you kind of shut it down a little bit early because you feel like you're spinning your wheels.
Yeah.
Because I think if you force yourself, you actually do end up detracting or taking away from, whatever the sort of fundamental like spark of
Mhm.
a creative idea is.
Yeah.
And so that's something that I would, I would really try and like uh, embrace as much as possible. Like, it's a lot easier when basketball season's on. Like I can come
Yeah.
home, if we're rehearsing like in the afternoon, I can come home and be like, all right, my job now is to like make dinner and watch the Raptors lose or whatever, right? Like,
Right.
um, but that's been a crucial kind of um ongoing like attempt at sort of shifting the way I think and kind of approach like some aspects of creativity.
Yeah, definitely. And then, sometimes when you like take that break, you come back and it's like it could sound like everyone agrees like, oh, this actually, maybe this is not going the way we thought, or
Yeah. Yeah.
maybe it's
And
just like, oh, I think it just needs one more thing.
right. And a thing that you like killed yourself over for like hours
Right.
and hours and hours because you just spent too many days and too many hours in a row, like working on it,
Hmm.
with the benefit of like 10 days, say, the
Yeah.
arbitrary number, obviously. Like, um, you come back and the thing that you were like, just couldn't, you were beating your head against the wall.
Right.
That thing becomes apparent in like 15 minutes.
Yeah. And it's, it's sometimes like just trying to push through it is not productive. And I don't mean that from like a like actual productivity standpoint. I mean, it's like you're going nowhere. So you
Yeah,
need to
that's
like
the
reset
negative
your
work, I
brain.
think,
Yeah.
right? Like that to me, that's how I've always thought about it, is sort of like that's when you actually are harming whatever it is you're working on.
Yeah.
Because you're trying to do too much like active
Hmm.
work on it.
Your brain
Like
can
a
only do so much.
exactly. Especially when you have to watch the Raptors, but like uh, no, like a perfect, I think one of the places I actually really felt like I had a breakthrough with that was that song Matilda on the Unraveling record. There's that bridge where it kind of like opens up a little bit, and Stefan is playing sort of a like guitar kind of riff thingy, and I just like had no idea while we were working on the song. I had everything else. I had my little chorus part. I knew what I was playing kind of in relation to like the guitar riff that like we thought just made more sense because Stefan's singing about his guitar. It's like, okay, it doesn't make sense for Steve to play the riff when Stefan's like singing a song about his guitar. All right, so I figured out all these verse and chorus things, whatever, pre-chorus. We know what's going to happen. Get to the bridge, and I'm just like, I have no fucking idea what I'm going to do. Uh, and put it down, and I think maybe it was almost like 2 months. Like it was like quite late in the process of working on the music that would eventually go on the Unraveling. I finally was like, all right, and I opened it up and was like, oh my god, he sings about George Harrison. Like I should just try and write like a George Harrison slide guitar
Oh, there you go.
line,
Yeah.
right? Like he talks about his guitar gently weeping, right? And so it's like, cool. I didn't touch this thing for like 6 weeks, and I came back and it was
Mhm.
written in 20 minutes.
Well, you're also in a different mindset than you were,
Exactly.
two months before.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
that's awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the creative process is just awesome, and also frustrating at
Oh
times.
yeah,
But
it is just like it's fascinating. It like not letting it become all encompassing as a matter of it actually being an all encompassing thing was sort of just like a weird that I don't even think I'm like expressing that thought in like a
sure.
very eloquent way, but like you have to let it go a little bit in
Yeah,
order for it to actually work in a way that I think is beneficial to like individual and collaborative kind
yeah,
of work.
love it. And honestly, just this conversation about this, it's got me really excited for the new album. So
Yeah, hey, right on.
uh, yeah, that's gonna be great, and that comes out in May, right?
May 2nd, yeah,
Okay.
the first week. It's a big weekend for us because the record comes out on Friday, and then my wife is from Kentucky. The Kentucky Derby is the next
Ah,
day,
yeah,
so
Derby Day.
it'll be a big party weekend for us. I think
Awesome.
in the house.
That's awesome. One of the kind of music related question before we kind of talk hoops a little bit. Uh, one thing I noticed is you play a jazz master, right?
I do, among other things. Yeah, I do. Yeah.
But
Mm-hmm.
like, you don't see a lot of you know punk rock guitarists playing jazz masters. Is there any sort of like reasoning behind that, or is it just
Yeah.
like kind of what you had?
No, what I had was tellies. I always had tellies because
Sure.
growing up, like my dad really liked the Rolling Stones,
Yeah.
and so obviously, like when you're like 15 and just like learning stuff on the guitar when you're 12,
Yeah.
whatever, however old I was when I started, um, like I had just like obviously thought Keith Richards was like the coolest motherfucker on the planet,
Yeah.
right? Like, so I got a telly and then was like, oh, and like Jimmy Page and like Prince, like those guys use tellies, you
Right.
know. So I had a telly for a long time, and then you know, um, I feel like I've probably talked about this like on Twitter or wherever, but uh, as I was sort of like finishing my music degree, I kind of had this like crisis of like as I think everyone does when they like have a milestone in their life, like graduating college or
Yeah.
something. Like, um, I was like, oh my god, like, am I going to go to graduate school? What am I going to do with my life? And is music even going to be a viable career path? Whatever,
Right.
all these like lunatic ravings. And so the Zach had like reached out as I had been kind of trying to think about what I was going to do and spiraling or whatever. Like Zach had reached out to invite me to jam in the sessions that ended up becoming PUP. Like, um, and I had been looking for all these guitar players that sort of like, um, because I studied jazz, like had kind of a foot in jazz and like a hand in like noise music and like free improv, just sort of like chaos music, and like another foot in like rock and roll. Excuse me. And obviously one of the guys that I gravitated towards and still to this day is probably a top 5 guitar player for me was Nels Cline
Okay.
from
Yeah.
Wilco, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so he was and still is, primarily a jazz master player.
Mhm.
And I always loved Fender guitars, so I think it was just an easier sell already of just like a cool Fender guitar. After the first time I'd seen Nels Cline was like sort of right as I was leaving high school and going into college, so
Yeah.
it was already still kind of percolating. Um, and yeah, I just found that it was like a real, part of it too is at the time like Stefan was playing um P90s as well, like or humbuckers, and depending on
Yeah.
which like Gibson guitar he was playing. But I do think in two guitar bands, there's always like a really great sort of built-in sonic variation when you have one person in the band who plays Gibson guitars and one person who plays Fender guitar, like the Strokes, right? The
Sure.
Strokes have that, or
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
just like whatever kind of rock bands. And so I just sort of like leaned into it and found that like the Jazzmaster that I have, which Fender was sent to me for very very cheap. They're very cool. They're super nice to me still, which is like one of the coolest things as like a kid who grew up playing Fender guitars. Um we found that it just like sounds great live. It sounds great on record, and like it's very I don't really like guitars, especially in a live setting. I think it's different when you're in the studio and you can kind of be a little bit more deliberate. But like live guitars, I want to be just like boneheaded, kind of.
Okay.
So like the Jazzmaster I have has none of this sort of like added like roller switches or anything. It just has a volume knob, a tone knob, and a pickup selector. It's like an American Professional series that came out a couple years ago. And I just found like all these guitars that I like on the road the most tend to be the ones that are just like they're modern. They feel like they're modern versions of like old guitars.
Yes.
So, and I've started to look for those kind of like in whether they're Telecasters or Jazz Masters primarily,
Yeah.
but I have a Rickenbacker and like, I have all kinds of weird stuff over here.
Yeah, that's that makes sense too. Like the balance, because like you kind of have to play off of, with Stefan and like having that duality. You kind of have to make sure it's balanced out because if you have the same tone, I'm sure it's going to kind of be a little
Yeah.
dull.
And I think one of the things for the most part, I was actually talking about this with a friend recently. Uh Basically like you have to be you forget how much space there is even just with guitars and basses in different octaves. Like if you were to think of all the different parts of a band, members of a band on like a piano,
Mm.
a lot of the time, especially in punk music, as sort of an aesthetic choice, it gets kind of smushed together in like the
Right.
middle of the keyboard, right? The middle to kind of like mid low part of the keyboard. Um, and in those sorts of like two octaves or whatever. Um, so that even just reminding myself that if you think of it like that, there's more room on either side. So higher, you can go higher and you stay out of the way of the vocal, which allows you to do things in higher octaves that you wouldn't be able to do if you had smushed everything in there because the notes are going to react to the different instruments or voices because everything gets compressed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the same thing is like going all the way low. So now I think, and this is again talking about just like interrogating your own ego or whatever. Like I think in the past I used to, if Stefan was doing like a lead thing, I'd be like, oh, what the fuck, man? Like that's my job, like, and we like laugh about this shit. But like now I'm kind of like, oh, sometimes Stefan will play something high. And it's like if he goes high, I go low, or I go in the mid, or I try and double the thing, or like rather than feeling like I'm the only guy who gets to play way high
Right.
and everybody else has to stay down low, which is like not particularly interesting.
Yeah.
And like, and a funny thing about like growing up loving the Rolling Stones is like when I go back to listen to them now, or when I hear them, I'm out in the world and they come out on, like on the radio in like some restaurant or something.
Mhm.
Um, that's what makes the Rolling Stones interesting. Is like there's not really a lead guitar player and there's not really a rhythm guitar player. It's kind
Sure.
of just this bubbling thing of like different octaves and stuff kind of working in tandem.
Right.
Um so I think having different guitars helps with that,
Yeah.
but also just being cool to sometimes play fucking loud power chords because nobody else
Yes.
is doing that,
Uh-huh.
right? Like that, I have to be okay with that.
Yeah.
Like, and
I
I am
mean,
okay with that, but
yeah, the idea of like a lead guitarist, I feel like is kind of archaic these days. I feel like,
totally.
you play where it fits right in the song.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, okay, yeah, very interesting. And like, and I mentioned like, I don't feel like you see a ton of jazz masters in punk rock. Do you see PUP as like a punk rock band? Because I feel like sometimes that word is like today's.
Yeah. I think if you were, I don't know what else you would call it
Yeah,
in
right.
absence of that. I think it's that's
Exactly.
it. I don't know that we ever like consciously were like punk rock,
Yeah.
dude. Um, but I think the stuff that we all sort of bonded on musically,
Hmm.
especially early on, was sort of like, if not punk in sort of like aesthetic, then certainly punk in like spirit
Yeah.
too. And I think that was sort of we realized that we all liked heavy music, even if it was like metaphysically heavy music, right? Like Nels Klein and Wilco is fucking heavy.
Yeah.
Like there are Wilco records that, in my opinion, are heavy.
Hmm.
Like, but that's not like that is different than like a Mastodon record.
Totally.
But
I
both of those bands were like integral
yeah.
in like the early going for our band. Like just
I've
being like,
actually tried to, I've introduced Wilco to people who had, they're like, where do I start? And I'm like, well, traditionally you like heavier stuff, so I'd say you should go with like Summer Teeth, which is like kind of like maybe one of their heavier albums.
yeah, just like, and it's weird and kind of hazy
But
and like,
comparatively, it's not that heavy to
yeah,
like
exactly, right. Or
a
like a Ghost is
Mastodon.
Born. Like I feel
Right.
like I just read like Stephen Hayden
Oh
just wrote
yeah.
a cool piece about Ghost is Born, and
Hmm.
that was like that was my introduction to Wilco. Like a
Sure.
little bit of um Yankee Hotel Foxtrot, but like those two records both came out like when I was in high school, so they
Yeah,
were
yeah.
like huge for me.
Hmm.
I'm dating myself here, but that's
No, not at all. Um, yeah, as a huge Wilco fan, I appreciate that very much. Yeah, that's awesome. Uh, do you and switching gears? Do you feel the Raptors are punk rock right now?
oh, it's they certainly are playing with reckless abandon.
They sure are.
Um, whether that's good reckless abandon or not, I mean, I was just catching up. I missed the game last night
Mhm.
because my wife and I watched the Oscars, but
Yeah.
um, was just catching up on Blake Murphy is one of my best friends.
Hmm.
Uh, and yeah, just definitely have they kind of blew that lead against Chicago over the weekend, and I don't know when this is coming out, so this might all be dated at this point, but yeah, I mean it's tough. They're in a strange place, but I maintain it's better to be a Raptors fan now
Hmm.
than I think being a fan of, I don't know, the Sixers. Like,
Yeah.
who feels better actually? I like, and this isn't just me clowning on the Sixers, even though I love doing that too.
Oh
But
yeah.
like, um, or like, I don't know that I would want to be cheering for like Charlotte or Washington. Like, yeah, maybe you'll get Cooper Flag, but like, are you gonna
Right.
even be watchable? Like, the Raptors could get Cooper Flag.
It's true.
Like they're in the bottom five right now. So I think it's tough. Um, there are days when I really, really do want them to win. Like
Yeah, I
that win
know.
against the Sixers a few weeks ago, I loved. I thought
It's
was
hard
really,
not
really great.
to.
But at the end of the day, the thing that is the best for them is what everyone has started calling like perfect tank losses. You
like
know,
like maximizing minutes and efficiency, but also
yeah,
losing.
yeah, like make it like really, really close down the
Yeah.
stretch.
Bulls are
Um,
experts in that.
yeah,
Bulls
yeah,
are very good
yeah.
at that.
But yeah, see, the Raptors like out bulls the Bulls on the weekend
They did.
because like they held out longer, being like allergic to scoring a basket in overtime, and the Bulls ended up winning that game, which I'm
They
sure
let
was,
Josh Giddey kind of go crazy.
yeah, which I'm sure was agony for Bulls fans.
Yeah.
But even like, again, would you rather be a fan of the Raptors right now or a fan of the Bulls? Like I I don't know, man.
I you
That's
know I talk about it way too much, but yeah, like Raptors are at least going all in on like we're gonna try and be great, or we're just gonna let ourselves be bad, and that's
yeah.
fine.
I think the thing is, if Scotty Barnes didn't have in his first, what, this is year 4,
Yeah.
um he has an rookie of the year and an all-star game appearance already. And I think someone made the point of like, he is a willing passer who is still figuring out how to be the number one option on a team.
Mhm.
And like, if you think about Scotty Barnes as someone who could realistically, if he does want to pass, like be kind of a walking triple double threat in terms of his development, having a guy like Brandon Ingram for him to pass to, if you looked up next year and the Raptors were like the 6th or 7th seed because they got a bounce back health year from Brandon Ingram, you get another year of kind of Emmanuel Quickly and Scotty Barnes. You have Jakob Pertl, who's a guy that they all seem to love and who has made a difference, even though he doesn't feel like a kind of truly modern center.
Yeah.
Um, would you really be that surprised if they were
No.
like sixth or seventh? in
If
in the
everything
Eastern
goes
Conference.
right, yes.
Yeah,
And
and
like great. What about like Grady? Like,
right, exactly.
yeah,
Like you maybe now, rather than Grady being a starter and
yeah.
having to contend with, um, the team's second or third best starting defender being
Hmm.
on him to take away one of the most reliable outlets
Sure.
for Barnes. All of a sudden, Grady's the sixth man. And, he's shown way more cutting this year. He's shown way more physical toughness than I think anybody expected.
Hmm.
Um, like was bleeding from the face the other day. It was like,
Yeah. He's
is
putting up some high point
yeah,
numbers.
he's
Yeah.
I think he's hit a bit of that second year
Sure.
wall. Like
Sure.
the health, um, for the most part has been there, but I think
Yeah.
just like he's learning and still like literally is so young that I'm like he is still growing like as a
Yes.
human
Yeah. Right.
being,
Uh-huh.
like um uh so I just think like there's more there than I think I would have expected. And that's even before you add Brandon Ingram. Like I was pretty
Sure.
high on the team and so, I kind of have allowed myself to feel optimistic while simultaneously being like we need all of the great tank losses
Yes.
we can get.
Growth while still losing.
Yeah. Because like the last thing anybody wants is for the Sixers, now that they've shut down Joel Embiid, to like get
Mhm.
into the lottery sweepstakes. Like they do
No,
not deserve that.
no, definitely not.
Sorry, Sixers fans. I don't know if there
There's
are any Sixers fans listening here, but
honestly, probably Sixers fans are probably my number one tally on this podcast.
well,
There's many people that come on here that are Sixers fans.
I don't feel bad for them.
I don't either personally, especially when I drafted Joel Embiid on my fantasy team this
Oh,
year, and
that's
it
tough.
just yeah.
That's tough. I will say, I'll shout someone out. My friend from Toronto. Her name is Katie Heindel. She
Mhm.
writes a
She was on the pod, yeah.
yeah. She writes a blog called Basketball Feelings. As you know, since
Hmm.
she's been on the pod, I did think she wrote a really really thoughtful piece on Joel Embiid that I think she published a few days ago. So I would
Amazing,
certainly encourage people to read that,
definitely, yeah, definitely check that out.
which is the nicest I'll be to Sixers fans for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I keep talking to people about coming on the podcast, and it's like another Sixers fan. Okay, all right.
It's tough, I think
I can do it. It's all
I
right.
get it. Like a lot of our friends that we kind of came up touring with, like early on, were a lot of people were in Philly.
And that yeah, that's what it is. Like
Yeah.
Philly, it's in the indie basketball intersection. Like Toronto and Philly are pretty major hubs for that.
Yes, certainly they are. Certainly they are.
But like as we're talking about that right now, like I do feel like you are kind of an ambassador for the Raptors. Like, have you done anything like in an official capacity with them?
No, I've done a little bit. I've been kind of gotten to know some of the people who are on the Blue Jays side of things.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Blake
Uh,
was also
Blake,
on the
of course.
podcast.
Yeah. But no, I prefer. I have my like preferred section.
There you go.
I hang out in the rafters with the regular people.
Yeah.
Uh, I would love to do some of that stuff, but I don't. Something about us is, I think broadly, we haven't like chased a lot of that
Uh-huh.
stuff, which maybe is to our like um is maybe doing a disservice to ourselves, but I don't know. I think one of the reasons I reconnected so heavily with sports fandom,
Mhm.
both from a basketball and kind of baseball side, because I played baseball competitively until I was 18.
Yeah.
And I was like tall enough in high school, especially in like a just like lame neighborhood in Toronto. Like
Did you pitch?
I pitched a little bit and I played
Yeah.
first base. Yeah.
Same here.
There you go. And a little bit of basketball.
Yeah.
But when the band started kind of going like full time, even when we weren't making money to like sustain ourselves, and I still had to work, whatever job. I sold glasses for a long time. I worked for a catering company. I did all kinds of weird stuff. But
Yeah.
like, as you do, sports fandom was sort of how I was able to um like refill the part of my life that was a little bit empty after
Hmm.
turning my passion, which was music, into sort of my full-time like job
Yeah.
concern, which I would, again, 10 out of 10 times would do.
Right. Good
Right.
problem to
But
have.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely. But like, it was pretty jarring initially to be like, oh, like in the moments where I would have fun playing guitar, that feels a little bit like work,
Hmm.
or it's happening at a time, that just like it doesn't make sense to be playing the guitar. What am I gonna do?
Sure.
Like, and so sports fandom was a big way, also to reconnect with my dad.
Hmm.
Not that anything was ever weird between us, but more just like, oh, this is a cool way for us to like spend time together as like
Totally.
adults.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So that was just sort of like that was more important to me, and still is more important to me than like demanding to be on the Bill Simmons podcast or something. I don't know, like,
Right.
if that were to happen, that'd be cool, but it would happen because uh I wasn't chasing it and they were
Right.
I don't know. It's just like it's one
Well,
of
I
those
mean,
things.
that's back to that punk rock ideology, right? Like it's not punk rock to
Clout
want to be.
chase. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
uh yeah, I mean that makes total sense to me. Like it's not like I want to be the music ambassador for the Raptors, like,
No, yeah, yeah.
which there's already a different music ambassador obviously for the Raptors, but
Yes, there is. I'm not even the most famous Toronto punk that likes the Raptors, right? That is for sure the homie Dallas Green.
mm-hmm.
uh, that he definitely is like the number one punk Raptors fan,
Yeah.
which is fine because then a lot of the time when I see him, if we're out and about at it's like at a bar or at a venue or something. Most of the time, he and I just kind of stand at the back and like miss a lot of the show because we're talking about like Darko Rajakovic's like defensive schemes.
There you go. So I guess on that note too, when you tour, is there always like someone that you're like, yeah, we could talk basketball or something like that?
Yeah, usually there's someone.
Yeah.
I feel like even when it was like not people, uh, like one of our like oldest friends, even though we haven't toured together a lot recently, but like Jeff Rosenstock, obviously huge Knicks fan, like
Okay.
he and
Yeah.
I will text all the time about
Yeah. Yeah.
about that stuff. And like we were doing a tour with Pool Kids
Hmm.
a while back, right? And like Andy was a big
Yeah.
Miami Heat guy.
I talk with Andy about the Heat
Yeah,
regularly. Yeah.
yeah, so I think there's a lot of it's nice to find those people, and to have, I guess I wore a Raptors jersey on stage long enough now that
Right.
I've sort of like pushed that out
They
into the
flock to
universe.
you
So
now.
now, yeah,
Yeah.
now everyone knows, like I had to like pump the brakes on the Raptors jerseys on stage on a regular basis because like they would like lose in the bubble,
Ah,
and
yeah.
people would be like, "Are you okay?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I'm fine."
Right.
Like,
Oh man.
yeah.
Um, so growing up, like what was your like who was your favorite player? Like what was the team that first when you first became all in on the
I
Raptors?
mean, it's kind of obvious, but it is true. Like it was Vince, right?
Yeah,
Like
right.
for everyone. I mean, I'm born in '88, so 2000 dunk contest, I would have been 12.
Perfect time.
Exactly. But my dad, I think, was very stoked to have an NBA team at all.
Yeah.
And I got to go like see, um, like I saw the Magic, like the Showtime Lakers, the end of the Showtime Lakers, like, um, play the Raptors, and
Hmm.
like, um, that was the year that they like were one of the losses for the Jordan Bulls.
Uh-huh.
I think that's the first year, '95, right? Is when
Yes,
they have,
yes, yes.
so like it was always kind of there. You used to be able to get like our version of like CVS is
Hmm.
called Shoppers Drug Mart,
Okay.
and like they used to sell the tickets like at Shoppers Drug Mart. Like you could go and get tickets for like $10.
Nice.
So, but yeah, I think Vince, and then obviously like everything kind of in the 5 or 6 years sort of leading up to the championship.
Yeah.
Um, everything from Jose Calderon and like,
Hmm.
Amir Johnson,
Yeah.
like all the way into sort of like when they traded Rudy Gay for, and that's always a bit. It's been a big thing people have been talking about this year because it's the 30th anniversary. But like the Rudy Gay trade for Kyle and Demar, and you
Hmm.
know, I was a huge Jonas Valanciunas guy. I still am. I still love JV,
Yeah.
but like he was just like,
Man, he works hard, dude.
yeah, and you know, growing up as like you know the like skinny like tall white kid,
Yeah.
I definitely was like I love Dirk Nowitzki, and so
Uh-huh.
and I feel like all those like guys who have like weird last names like mine, I had like a soft spot for, you
Uh-huh.
know,
Uh-huh.
um uh you know, but
What about you didn't go for Bargnani?
he was like less. I think it was
Yeah.
so it's so funny. Like he it just was so tough. That was such a strange time, you know, like
Yeah, totally.
but also again we rat fuck the Knicks on that one. So like I am at the end of the day, if
Mm-hmm.
you have to give it up for Andrea Bargnani because without him, the Raptors probably don't have Kyle Lowry,
That's fair.
which
It's all
means
related. Yeah.
exactly right. Excuse me, exactly.
And we have the yeah, we both share a love for DeMar, even though my stint with his was much shorter.
Yes,
But
yeah,
yeah,
Demar's the best.
he is.
Even like I know he you know he signed with Sacramento, but I was like, oh, it'd be so cool if they just like signed him to come home.
They should.
Uh,
They should.
yeah, I
I
think
wish Rose did that. I wish
yeah,
Rose did like a short contract, but
yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I think Demar, Kyle, like those guys will be retiring Raptors. That would be my guess.
I could certainly see that happening.
Kyle, I think for sure. I
Yeah.
would understand if Demar was like, "I'm good, actually. I love
Right.
Toronto, but like, I'm not retiring a Raptor."
Is it hard seeing Kyle in Philly?
No,
Okay.
no, no, no. No, because we won.
There you go.
You
Yep, you
know,
got
like,
it. It's like
yeah,
it erases everything. It's like you
it
got
does.
there,
Yeah,
I'm good.
I did want. That was my only like real impetus for like cheering for Miami. You know,
Hmm.
was I wanted Kyle. I did want Kyle to win a second one because my like hot take is he's better than Chris Paul.
Ooh, that is hot.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one of them has a ring.
That's fair.
Yeah, one
That's
of them's been to the
yeah.
conference finals. Uh,
Adam Morrison has 2 rings.
yeah. Yeah, no,
I love
that's my
that.
like that's my scorching hot take.
Yes.
And
Okay.
it's completely personal bias, obviously, but like,
Well, I hope you hang in there on the current status of the Raptors, but that's sports are cyclical. You'll make it out.
oh yeah, look, listen, I have a friend coming to town this week from London, and he and I are going to both the Utah Jazz Washington Wizards doubleheader, like or the back to back.
Yes.
So you
The
know,
tank tourney.
yeah, exactly, just like the ugliest what like 96 minutes of basketball
Yeah.
that I could watch in a weekend, but you know, that's what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, the last kind of bit, like to usually close on like something a little more fun, and I would love for you to participate in something called Build a Band, and I'd love you to see if you can make a band out of NBA players.
Oh, not only can I make a band out of NBA players, as a Canadian, I feel like uh, I could make a band out of NBA players drafted from Canada in the last 10 years.
Ooh, you
So
putting limitations on yourself, and I love it.
so it is what I did.
Okay.
So how do you want me how I have this written as the All Canadian Youth Movement Band, but that's just because I needed something to kind of put my thinking together. I don't know that I have a name for the band yet.
That's fine. I mean, let's go like, form your band instrument by instrument. Like, what's
All
the
right.
play style?
So we're gonna yeah. I was thinking kind of like it might be like a little bit of a rap rock, like political rap rock. Maybe it's like a
Oh,
Rage Against the Machine sort of
yeah.
thing.
Okay.
Given you know what's going on between our two countries, obviously a very
Yes.
deep
Uh-huh.
flexing of just the ugliest.
Hockey really highlighted that.
Yes, the ugliest parts of capitalism on full display.
Uh-huh.
So we're gonna have Zach Eady. He's gonna play drums
Mm-hmm.
because like his kind of play with the Memphis Grizzlies this year, I feel like he's been uh it's been very understated,
Mm-hmm.
very um uh fundamentally sound.
Mm-hmm.
And I think broadly he's just been playing solid basketball and setting like a good foundation for someone like Jaren Jackson Jr. to roam around defensively.
Mm-hmm.
And he's cleaning up the little bit that he needs to on the boards. I'm gonna have him playing drums, right?
I feel like he could also, like, if he needs to, he can really punch the drums.
Totally, exactly.
Yeah.
He can lay into it. He's a big man,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
All right. This is going to be controversial, but stick with me here. The most powerful harmonic and melodic instrument in a band is the bass player, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
they control the low end both of the keyboard. If we're talking about how the octaves fan out, they're the lowest part of the keyboard, which means they can superimpose or control how people hear the rest of the music.
As someone who started off as a bass player, you don't have to tell me twice.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. There you go. So, who's the guy that you want in your band that was drafted in Canada in the last 10 years to have control over whatever is going on? There's one answer. So, Shea Gilgeous-Alexander is going to play bass.
Okay. Yes. Shea is the Canada guy right now. Yeah.
Yes. So, he plays bass.
Yeah.
Right. You would think maybe he's the lead singer. No. We're going to get to the lead singer.
He is more understated than that.
He's a bass player. He's playing bass. He's also like the bass player that maybe actually is better at guitar than the guitar player. Yeah. You know what I mean? But he's like, it's okay, guys. Like, I'll play bass.
Like bass in Interpol. Interpol goes crazy.
Exactly. Okay. I decided to have one guitar player and one multi-instrumentalist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So your guitar player has to be a little bit flashy, a little bit daring, but also willing to kind of contribute in a way that makes everything flow together. That's Jamal Murray.
Yes.
Okay. Right. You trust him to do something audacious against the Lakers to send them packing in the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
You also expect him to generally defend if you need to do the inverted pick and roll. He's setting the screens for Nikola Jokic. This guy, he's not going to make any mistakes.
High risk, high reward.
Yeah, and he's a crazy person. A bit of a crazy person.
Yeah.
Right. Your multi-instrumentalist, maybe he has to play keys. Maybe he plays rhythm guitar. Maybe he's doing a little bit of percussion. Do you trust him to do any of those things on their own? Not really, but it's okay because he can kind of work way better in a system than anyone expected. We're talking, of course, about RJ Barrett.
Yes. Okay.
Right.
We knew he'd fit in somewhere. Yeah.
Yes.
But where is he fitting in? And not one spot.
No. Like, do you need him to make the like noisy feedback so that the band sounds less rappy and more like Nine Inch Nails?
Yeah.
Or do you need him to play guitar so it sounds more like like a heavy metal band?
Maybe he'll just do some swells,
Right. Yeah. Like, do you need some sort of like post-punky, almost like does it need to sound to keep it Canadian? Does it need to sound a little bit like Godspeed in moments? Right? Maybe it does. Okay. RJ Barrett, multi-instrumentalist. So that leaves a lead singer, right? Now, this sort of like out of control, political, maybe, and pretty heavy, opposition to the evil empire, to steal a Rage Against the Machine. There's again, it became very clear to me that there's only one person who could be the lead singer of the all Canadian Build-A-Band. Do you have a guess who it might be?
No, I'm blanking.
It's Dylan Brooks.
Oh, yes, of course.
Dylan Brooks talking like elite smack to LeBron on a regular basis.
Walking in front of the interviews.
Yes. Being like just like totally off leash throughout the Olympics in a way that I think was like huge for the team. And I would urge the listeners, if they haven't seen the clip when Canada won that game in the World Cup, I think it was against Greece, but I don't remember for sure, to like punch their ticket to the Olympics. There's an interview with RJ Barrett and Dylan Brooks just yelling about Mississauga, which is the suburb of Toronto that they're from. It's perfect. It's a perfect video. Dylan Brooks is your rap rock lead singer.
Yes, absolutely. Because he's like, it's rap rock, but also you can tell he's gonna have a little bit of hardcore coming through the back.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. So there you go. Yeah. Zach Eady drums, Shay bass, Jamal Murray guitar, RJ Barrett Swiss Army knife, multi instrumentalist, Dylan Brooks frontman.
It's the sort of you know, hard, well thought journalism that this world needs.
I'm doing what I can, you know.
And yeah, easily the most explained build a band I've ever had on here. So and it's it's the most vivid. So
well, thank you. I did have a moment of being like, well, I should just have like whatever band I have should have Dennis Rodman in it.
a lot of people do.
Yeah.
So
And
it was the right move to leave him out.
that's what that, and I sort of was like, oh, like, you know, and then I was sort of thinking about Canadian players, and I was like, well, you could get Rick Fox, you could get Steve Nash. But honestly, I think this is sort of a golden era of Canadian talent in the NBA, which kind of mimics, you know, the sort of early 2000s. That's what it kind of reminded me of, like your Broken Social Scenes and whatever else. And so then I was like, okay, let's pick it. Let me get the youth movement here.
Steve Nash makes this a different band. Like that does lean into more of like a Yellow Tango vibe.
Yeah, totally. Maybe Wilco, you know, to bring it all full circle.
Not to say anything wrong with that. Steve Nash is great.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, dude, this is amazing. Love the build a band. Good luck to your Raptors going forward.
Thank you. Yeah, we are cheering for bottom feeders. You said you are a Bulls fan, despite the fact that you have a Minnesota Twins hat.
I'm a you know, I run indie basketball, but I'm a huge baseball fan, so I have many a baseball hat.
There you go. That'll be that's an offline conversation for
yes, definitely. But yeah, once again, great to have you on. Super excited for the new PUP album. And yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. I'm sure I'll see you again. And yeah, May 2nd, you know, everyone knows where to find it. It's
absolutely,
we're out there. We're around.